What's going on, y'all? Episode 32, Let's Be Real podcast, man. We got a good one for y'all today, as always. And you look, you already know how we starting it, man. We got wine, a little switch up for y'all today. So this is actually an orange wine, uh, and the name of it is actually Orange. And so this is Orange by Gruner Veltliner. So again, orange wine. I'd actually give this one about a 7 out of 10, man. It's a little switch up from what I would normally like, but wanted something a little more refreshing today. And look, this is it's light, it's crisp, it's a drier wine, which y'all know I like. Definitely got a nice little like apricot or like peach kind of smell to it. The taste is you definitely get that orange kind of taste with it. It's almost like a blood orange, and some apricot flavor as well. But look, great price point is about $15. So if you're looking for something, look, especially with summer coming up, this is a great wine for summer. Hanging by the pool, you got some fruit, anything like that, some veggies, like I would definitely say go check this out and pick up a bottle. Like I said, good price point, solid wine. I definitely recommend it, especially if you are, like I said, looking for something a little more refreshing. But look, man, we got a lot to get into today, man. We're going to talk about the Cowboys and what they're doing, Brock Purdy and the Niners, talk about Aaron Rodgers. You know, we're going to get into some basketball, some Lakers, some Suns. We're going to talk about some pretenders and contenders in the NBA. And yeah, man. But first, look, we're going to start in the NFL. We're going to start with the Bengals because they went out and signed Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. So extended both of them. Jamar's getting 4 years, 161. T's getting 4 years, 115. And so, man, almost what? $300 million almost over the next 4 years for these two receivers. And look, I got to say, I think this is a big miss by the Bengals. Now, you heard Jamar and Higgins in their interviews came out and said, you know, Burrow helped us, like his comments helped us get these deals done. And so we're definitely going to talk about just what this means for Joe Burrow. But first, I'm going to just start again. Why I can't see this being a good idea. And for starters, just the obvious. This is the exact same team we saw last year on offense. And yeah, the offense was historic, but now it's also historic in that the amount that it's paying for its receivers is unprecedented. And I know a lot of y'all, might be saying, "Oh, well, the Eagles pay for Devontae and they pay for AJ Brown." The only difference is both those players, their contracts are backloaded with void years. So, for instance, like I think AJ's making like over 30 million guaranteed in the last year of his deal. And so they got void years that, again, Howie does a great job as far as manipulating the salary cap, and they're putting a ton on the credit card right now, but eventually those payments come due. Only reason people or teams typically do not do what the Eagles are doing is because you have to front a lot of that guaranteed money up front, especially on those void years. And so it's not something every owner is willing to do. Jeffrey Lurie's willing to do it. And so Howie obviously rolls with that. But again, so when we're talking about paying two receivers on your team high end dollar, the way that it's done between the Eagles and the Bengals is incredibly different. And so this with Jamar and T these are legitimate, like they got paid right now. And so we saw last year again with the same team what the Bengals were able to do. Great offense, not top in any category, top 5 in most, and a defense that couldn't keep them in games. Now, I know they got the new DC, and so maybe they're thinking, well, with the new DC, our defense, we won't be able to spend the same money on it. They're going to try to sign Hendrickson back. I can't see how they do that. But even if they do, I mean, again, he's just going to take up another chunk of your salary cap, and it's just less money you can put out anywhere else. And so that defense is going to be worse. It's going to have worse personnel. They're going to have to nail the draft, which they've kind of historically been like all right at drafting. And so you're running back the same team on offense, way more expensive, and possibly a worse defense, hoping that a new DC can elevate it enough to keep you in games so you can win them 40-35. And to me, again, it's not a recipe for success. even those Chief teams, when we think about the Chief team that won the Super Bowl that first year, where it was this high flying offense and a bad defense, that defense ranked like 16th. This Bengals defense is going to be last or close to it. And so it's just that's not a recipe that has ever been successful in the NFL. And again, I think they're just handcuffing themselves into, I mean, they're going to look, Joe Burrow, going back to his comments, Joe Burrow's going to love it because he's going to be putting up crazy numbers still as long as he can stay healthy. But what this means, man, is look, Joe Burrow, there's no excuses for Joe Burrow this year. Look, and I talked last week about how we the quarterbacks, right? And which ones are elite, the Mahomes, Allen, Lamar, and how I've dropped Burrow out of that category. And him and Jalen are kind of in the same category now, as far as like just under elite, but probably that fourth, fifth spot as far as ranking the quarterbacks. And this, to me, this says that he and or the Bengals also do not view him like they don't view Joe Burrow as elite, because we do not see teams put this kind of money on the offensive receivers if they have an elite thrower, an elite quarterback. Now, the Ravens are a little different. They've tried and they've put money into it, but just the style of play they've had not really conducive to it. But when you look at especially a Patrick Mahomes, a Josh Allen, who that's where people want to put Burrow in those categories, they move off of expensive receivers because they know we have a guy who can elevate mid-level, lower-level receivers. And so, again, to me, this takes out any excuse from Joe Burrow. Look, they've missed the playoffs the last, 2 years, I believe. The slow starts every year. It's no more excuses, man. Like, you asked for this, you got what you wanted. Now look, I love when players like Joe Burrow came out and said, yeah, I want these guys back. Because yeah, and look, I'm glad and I'm glad Jamar got paid. Like, I'm all for players getting paid. I'm all for, a QB backing their guys. But look, it can't be the personnel decision too. Him backing his guys public. It can't be what sways personnel decision. And as a GM, that falls on you. And so, to me, I think we're going to see a lot of the same from Joe Burrow and the Bengals as we did last year. If they're healthy, their offense is going to be really good, and they're probably going to win 8 or 9 games. And so, now, does that get them in the playoffs? Maybe. Can they make some magic happen in a playoff for a game? Maybe 2, maybe. But I think it's far more likely that we see them over the next 4 years missing the playoffs more than we see them in a conference championship game. And so that's just my thoughts on it. Again, I think from my standpoint, I think that what should have happened is T should have been moved 2 years ago, last year, for some draft picks. Their offensive line is not great. That could have used some bolstering. Their defense could have used some bolstering. But you've allocated the funds to the offense, and so we'll see if you get Hendrickson signed. And if not, man, that defense is going to be rough. So speaking of players getting signed, and at this point, a player who's not signed, man, we're going to move to the Cowboys and Micah Parsons. And so big question here is, what should the Cowboys do? Obviously there's been speculation of maybe they trade Micah. There's been speculation that they're going to sign him to a big deal. And look, in true Cowboys fashion, that price just keeps going up. And my guess is if they do end up signing him, they're going to do it at the last possible second and pay him the absolute most they can. Which from Micah's standpoint, great. Good for you. Again, like I said, love players getting paid. From the Cowboys standpoint, I love it as an Eagles fan because it means you guys are going to be worse. And so with what I think the Cowboys should do is, and let me actually back up because I think this kind of ties in really great. I don't think we talked about Micah and the DeMarcus Lawrence when he left to Seattle talking about, I wasn't going to win a Super Bowl there. And Micah coming out calling him a clown. And with that, I saw a lot of sports people. Some I agree with a lot, some I don't. But I saw them saying, they agree with Micah because pointing out DeMarcus Lawrence ever since he got that big deal kind of hasn't lived up to it, which is true. He hasn't. But what I will say is I don't think DeMarcus Lawrence is saying anything that any of us, including the people who took Micah's side on it, disagree with. I mean, our biggest thing with the Cowboys over these last couple of years is, well, let's look last year as an example. We're going all in, and they did nothing. And then they needed a running back. And so Jerry Jones let it slip that they were going to go after a running back. And then they got hopped and somebody took the running back they were looking at. And so they don't make moves conducive to winning a Super Bowl. And I think we all agree with that. Now, because DeMarcus Lawrence takes a shot at him on the way out, saying what we've all been thinking, I don't understand the support behind Micah for calling him a clown and the kind of, oh, well, you shouldn't have said that. Like, you were part of the losing. And yeah, he was. But again, what we've all been saying is the Cowboys don't make moves conducive to winning. Jerry Jones doesn't make moves conducive to winning. And so if that's the case, DeMarcus Lawrence is right. And so feeding into this, what do I think the Cowboys are going to do? I think they're going to pay Micah last minute. And I think they're going to give him a crazy salary. He will become the highest paid non-quarterback in the league. He's the last person from his last major player from his draft class who hasn't signed an extension yet now that Jamar has. And so I think that's what the Cowboys do. What they should do, what an organization who's trying to win would do, I think, is trade Micah. Get a crazy haul of draft picks and then go in and kill the draft. Because the Cowboys right now are not a Micah Parsons on the biggest contract signing away from even competing for second place in their division. They are maybe a get a ton of picks for Micah Parsons and go and kill 80% of your draft. Now that might be enough to get you into second place in the division this year and competing for the division this year and actually competing, maybe for contention this year. I don't think you are, but possibly if you really go out and kill the draft. I also don't think the coach signing is something that kind of points to looking to win. And so, again, I think the Cowboys have operated under basically what's the best way for us to be contenders. And they see that road and they 180 away from it and head down we want to be newsworthy. We want to have splash signings. We want to, be in the news and relevant. And I think a Micah Parsons signing does that for them. Doesn't make them contenders, and they'll probably be in third and finish above the Giants, which you may as well be last place because, let's be honest, the Giants are barely a football team right now. And so, yeah, I think that's what the Cowboys do end up doing. I don't think it's the smart move. Again, I think we've seen what they look like with Dak now making $60 million, CD making, a good portion of your salary cap, and then adding Micah to that in similar sense to the Bengals with their big signings. I just don't think – I think we've seen what this looks like, and it's not in contention. It's not anywhere near it. And it just then takes away from what you can do with the rest of the team. So, and then we're going to go one more as far as if we should pay him or not. And look, this one I've been on since the beginning. Brock Purdy and the Niners. So look, Niners offloaded a bunch of guys. Hufanga, Greenlaw, Various Ward, they lost a Debo. So, a ton of the guys that made that team great over the last few years are now gone. And it opens the door for Brock Purdy to get a big payday. Now, I think it was Sports Illustrated, a writer for them came out and explained why, hey, if they pay him, it's setting a bad precedent after a bad year. And I completely agree. Brock Purdy had his worst year as a starter when he didn't have, an all-star team around him. I think if you're the Niners and if you're a Niners fan, you're hoping that they don't sign him this year. And if you're the Niners, you owe it to the team and to yourselves to let him play out this contract this last season. Because, really, what's his leverage at this point? From the sounds of it, it sounds like from all the reporting around it, he's asking for 55 plus million. And look, we've seen what guys in this system as far as like the Shanahan tree, we've seen what it looks like when they have to pay the quarterbacks. Look no further than Tua. You pay a guy who is, and even outside of the system, look at Dak. You're paying guys who are arguably in that 12 to 20 range of ranking of quarterbacks. You're paying them top of the market. It doesn't work out. You've gutted the team of so much talent at this point. You're just hoping that Christian McCaffrey turns back into what he was, an aging running back who's always had injuries. That's a big gamble. And you've given him less weapons. George Kittle another year older. Defense not going to be as good, although they did bring back Robert Saleh, which I really like that move. But again, it's just you've seen what he looks like in less than ideal circumstances this last year, and it was missing the playoffs. And not great. Are you really going to pay him $55 million after that season? And potentially, that's what he looks like for the entirety of the contract. Because that is a good way to get, if you're a GM, you're a head coach, that is a really good way to get fired. And so, look, I think if you're the Niners, you owe it to yourself to not pay him right now. Make him play the deal out. And look, if that means he goes out and has an incredible year and you got to pay him $60 million instead of $55, it's worth it to make a $5 million mistake as opposed to making a $55 million a year mistake. So, yeah, I think you have to let him play it out. And then look, last one on the list, kind of waiting for all the domino. I guess there's two. But the last kind of domino to fall that will then kind of solidify where everyone is going to be going, and that's Aaron Rodgers, man. Look, it came out, Minnesota is out on Aaron Rodgers. They're going with JJ to be the QB1. I didn't understand any kind of reason why Minnesota would have been in on Rodgers. At this point, I think Sam Darnold is a better quarterback than Aaron Rodgers, and you had him in the building and let him walk for what turns out to not be too much. Like, I know it was like a 3-year, $110 million contract, but it's really only about, I think they said 30 million guaranteed. So you can get off that after this year. So I think, if they weren't willing to pay that for Darnold, who's a better quarterback, I don't see why they would be in on Aaron Rodgers. It's not like he's a great, from what he's shown, he's a great teammate. He hasn't shown that he's a great kind of role model for a younger quarterback like JJ would be. So I think the reporting around was just kind of weird. Do I think maybe they had a meeting? I would assume so, because if you're a team, you got to do your due diligence around everything. Do I even think maybe they gave a call to Rodgers like, hey, just kind of kicking the can around. Are you going to retire? Are you thinking you may want to come back? What are your thoughts? Do I think maybe they did that? Sure. But do I think there was ever really serious talk about like, hey, what would a contract for Rodgers look like? Let's really try to like dive into this. No, I don't think that was ever a thing. I think Rodgers and his camp probably started heavily pushing that because look, if I'm Rodgers, that's the best place to go for sure. The weapons they have on offense, that defense, the head coach, like that is ideally the place you would want to be out of any of the remaining options. So I could see why he's putting it out there. Like, yeah, I'm waiting on the Vikings. Yeah, I want to see what they come with. I could see why he'd be doing that. But from the Vikings point of view, yeah, to me, it doesn't make any sense at all. And look, that leaves us with two teams, really. Pittsburgh and the Giants. And it looks like that's the only destinations. And if you're Rodgers, as far as like who would be the better fit, from Rodgers' standpoint, probably Pittsburgh. Rodgers doesn't quite throw the deep ball like he used to, and you got two receivers there who, in Pickens and DK, that's kind of like what they do is go for the deep balls. And so fit there's kind of weird, but way better defense. Pittsburgh, obviously top 10 scoring defense every year. Head coach, I want to say Tomlin, but we've seen Daboll get Daniel Jones to a playoff game. So anybody who can get a tight end to a playoff game as their starting quarterback, You got to give them some credit for that. So I think neither spot is great. Again, I'm on record saying Pittsburgh, the best thing for them to do is just kind of blow it up. Let Tomlin lose the win streak. If you get rid of Tomlin, maybe. But for what I'll say is this, some franchises, 10 wins, making the playoffs and losing in round one, some franchises, that's a win. Arizona, that's a win. Carolina, that's a win. I don't think we view the Steelers franchise in the same bucket as we view the Cardinals or the Panthers. And so with a team that's got such a history of winning, 10 wins and making the playoffs is not a good season. That's not a winning season. And I think you're virtually guaranteed to have that, or worse, if you bring in Aaron Rodgers. I mean, look, kind of even solidified even more. The Jets, who Aaron Rodgers openly said he wanted to go back to the Jets, they didn't sign Aaron Rodgers and instead brought in the backup from Pittsburgh. So the guy Pittsburgh didn't want to bring back, the Jets went out and got, who is younger, at this point, more talented, far more upside. And now you're going to sign the guy that they didn't want. After winning, they win 4 or 5 games last year, 6 games. I don't even think it was 6. So to me, Rodgers, not a needle mover anymore. Probably throws the best warm-up football in all the league still. But it's just, that's not winning you games. And I don't see why Pittsburgh would be interested. I see why the Giants would be interested, because what else are you going to do? But and they're trying to save Dayball, and their GM are trying to save their jobs. So if you got to take a flyer on maybe Aaron Rodgers can do it, I get that. If I'm Rodgers though, Pittsburgh seems like a no-brainer. And so that kind of begs the question is, okay, well, why the wait? Why hasn't Rodgers signed yet? And look, I don't think, just based on everything we've heard from Rodgers about him wanting to go back to the Jets, him wanting to go to Minnesota, I don't think you go from wanting to play, especially for the Jets, I don't think you go from wanting to play for these teams to then being like, you know what, maybe I'll retire. That logic train doesn't track. So let's go ahead and let's safe to assume he's not considering retire. And if you're him and it's Giants or Pittsburgh, I mean, again, to me, I think Aaron Rodgers would go to Pittsburgh 1,000 out of 1,000 times over the Giants. Just structurally, from the GM down, much better organization, better team around him. And so, again, if those are the two options, he doesn't want to retire, why are we waiting? And I think what I would assume is, and it came out, I think this is a big part of it, it came out this last week that Pittsburgh was showing interest in Jalen Milroe. And, they got that 21st pick, so they'd be overdrafting him more than likely. But I think Aaron Rodgers is waiting to see what they do in the draft. I think if they go out and draft a quarterback, Aaron Rodgers will not sign. And so, look, we've seen Rodgers from his last little bit in Green Bay to with the Jets. He is about controlling the team. And with a team like Pittsburgh and a team like Tomlin, I don't think he was going to be able to do that just coming in. If he would have signed last week, or right when the Vikings said we're not interested, if he would have signed right then with Pittsburgh, he has no leverage in the situation. Now he's got some leverage. He's got some power in that organization, because he's going to kind of put it in their court, said, yeah, if you want me, I don't want a quarterback behind me. And it's not too far to say that he would say that, because he's said it before. And so to me, I think that's what they're waiting on. I think he's going to wait till after the draft to do that. And if you're Pittsburgh, how is that helping you win? If your goal with Aaron Rodgers is, we think he can get us to a higher place than we did last year. Because if you just wanted to do last year, Russell Wilson is still out there. And really, Russell Wilson is sitting there waiting to see which team Rodgers goes to, because Russell Wilson's probably going to the other one. But Pittsburgh is clearly saying, we want to be better than last year, as evidenced by we haven't re-signed Russell Wilson. And look, I'm not saying Russell Wilson is a great quarterback. Y'all know how I feel about him. But so Pittsburgh, your thoughts are Aaron Rodgers can get us to a different level than we were at last year. How is him sitting out until the draft? How is that helping your team be better than last year? Easy answer. It's not. And so I think that's what the holdup is right now on Aaron signing with them. And again, it's just Aaron Rodgers being Aaron Rodgers. And so I don't think it should be surprising to anyone that this is how this is kind of played out. All right, y'all. NBA time. So look, let's hop over to it. And we're going to start out, man. Look, we're going to start out with Bronny James. So look, I love that it happened to it and kind of so soon after all this Stephen A and him doing his victim tour came out. But Bronny James went out, look, against the Bucks who were playing their guys, got some real minutes, 30 minutes in the game, put up 17, 3 and 5, had a block, went 7 for 10 from the field, 2 of 4 from 3. And solid game. Had a great move against Giannis. And in true people with the name of Bron James fashion, after he made the great move and was clearly fouled, he didn't get the foul call. But anyways, great move by Bronny. And again, great game by Bronny. Like 70% from the field, 50% from 3, 17, 3 and 5, had a block. And all this kind of in the midst of, what's been kind of a turbulent news cycle around him for the last week or two with the Stephen A thing. And so I want to start with going back to this whole, and we talked about it some last episode, I believe, but this nepotism thing. And look, I think if you have seen him play or if you've watched him play in the league, if you've kept up with his numbers, if you watch him play the G League, he's more than solidified where he's been drafted. More than solidified. And so I think that's already enough to debunk the nepotism thing. But I also think it's just when we really, and he even talked about it post game. He said, I'm finally starting to get my win back, starting to get back into the rhythm of everything. And I think we forget that it's been a year and a half since he died on a basketball court. His heart stopped a year and a half ago almost. And so I think that kind of gets lost in kind of he came back, played some, didn't look great, got drafted, and there was all the, the spin around that. But if we look back, when he was in high school, he was projected to be drafted. At the end of his senior year, there were draft boards that had him high as in the lottery. And then he had a heart attack. And then a year later, people are crying nepotism pick when they forget, again, draft boards had him as high as a lottery pick. So I think you're starting to finally see him get back in a rhythm. You've been starting to see it in the G League. I love that he was able to come up, do it on an NBA court against really solid competition in good minutes. And I think this is kind of and it's what I've said whenever anybody's asked me about Bronny or I've talked about Bronny, I think this is kind of a perfect example of kind of what I've said about him is, look, he's not going to be a superstar. And let me not say he's not. More than likely, very high probability he is not going to be a superstar in the NBA. But with his skill set, if he can get more consistent with that jump shot and his defense, he is more than capable of being an NBA rotational player. And I know somebody had kind of said, not in the style of play, but in the career arc as far as a Seth Curry. But what I say is not kind of doing it the same way, kind of. Patrick Beverley. Look, Patrick Beverley had a good NBA career by playing defense and becoming a all right 3-point shooter. Look, Bronny has the build, the athleticism where he can be a good defender and he can hit 3-point shots. And so we saw Patrick Beverley on teams that competed doing that. And so to me, I think that's the outlook for Bronny. Lower end starting point guard at some point, maybe as a kind of a spearhead of a defense, or rotation guy. but he is more than shown that he belongs on an NBA court, and that when he's got his win back, now getting further removed from dying on on a court, he was justified in being drafted to the NBA. And at this point, if you don't think so, I question either your intelligence on basketball or your motives around the thinking of that. And if it's really about Bronny's game, or if it's more so about the last name on the jersey. And so, yeah, but no, I love it for Bronny again. Like, great game from him, and hopefully just keeps growing from it. Next, man, we got the Phoenix Suns. And so, look, I know I came on here, I think it was last week, when I had said if anybody can find me a bigger self-inflicted implosion than the Dallas Mavericks had, tag that team in the comments. And I was like, clip it and everything. I don't know if it's a bigger one, but it's in the same kind of ballpark as far as what Matt Ishbia and the Phoenix Suns have done. And so, look, obviously you go from a team who was in the finals to a team that was in, I believe, the conference finals the next year, to now a team that is competing with the Dallas Mavericks for the last play-in spot. And the Mavericks have gotten so bad to a point where there was legitimate concern they would be forfeiting games. So that team that full-on self-imploded and destroyed itself, that's the team that you are competing against for that 10 spot. And so, pretty big fall from grace, especially when you're comparing a team in the Mavs who best player right now that's not injured is PJ Washington, to a team that's got Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal. And so, look, I was right when I saw the Bradley Beal news, I very outspoken about the fact that I didn't think it would work. I thought they needed a point guard more than anything, and I was told, no, they got Tyus Jones, who I pointed out at the time. Tyus Jones is a starter, not great. And so, but anyways, I think you have three players who all play the same. And so, a little bit different than when you look at other teams with star players, right? Whether it's been KD and Golden State, where KD, Steph, Clay, Draymond, whoever you want to put there, all very different that complement each other. LeBron, Wade, Bosh, similar as far as LeBron and Wade, but they could play off each other pretty well because both of them were good cutters without the ball. Both of them could play make. LeBron obviously can play point. Bosh was able to kind of fit into a really good role of, I'm going to sit in the corner, I'm going to play defense, I'm going to rebound. Right now, LeBron and Luka, right? You got two guys, very similar play style, but LeBron can kind of tailor his game around how Luka plays. With Booker, KD, and Beal, none of them have the kind of they don't have like the pliability of being able to, or the malleability to kind of fit themselves around the other's game. All their games are the exact same, and that's what their game is. And so I was big on that. But look, when you're just looking at the outlook for the Suns right now, clearly a team where it's like, they've gone through coaches, they've got these three guys, they look like they would rather forfeit the rest of the season than play it. And if you're Phoenix, what are you going to do? Because look, KD is a free agent after next season. Bradley Beal has a no trade clause, and so he's not going to waive that to go somewhere to get, to kind of live in NBA Siberia. And no team that is contending, I don't think, would give up anything to get Bradley Beal, which means your only real piece is Devin Booker, that's got any kind of value. I mean, KD has a little bit, but he's going to be 37 at the start of next season going into a contract year. His value is not going to be very good, So Booker's the only one with value. And at that point, what are you going to do? Trade the young guy on your team that you have locked in and run a team that's led by Bradley Beal out there? I don't think so. So you got to keep Book. And so And also, there's no upside as well to trading Book and putting a bad team out there because the Suns, for the next 7 years, do not have a first round pick that is theirs. So they have either traded away or have swaps, some of which are 3-team swaps in which they get the worst of the 3 teams' first round picks. So for the next 7 years, you're not even incentivized to lose. And I think most of their second round picks are also gone. So you have no draft value at all. You have Bradley Beal with a no trade. Kevin Durant at probably the worst his value will ever be. And Devin Booker, which you have to keep because he's the only one that's going to keep that team relevant. And so, again, Matt Ishbia and the Phoenix Suns, if you ever need a crash course on, again, similar to the Mavs, if you need a crash course on how to take a franchise that was knocking on contention and winning a championship and getting down to being one of the worst teams in the league as quickly as possible, I think Mavs have the number one spot there. Close second is the Suns. And so with that, obviously, my assumption is Kevin Durant will be out next year, traded. And if not, he's going to be a free agent next summer. Where's the best spots for him? And so prior to everything with the Mavs, I would have said the Mavs. I think even after the trade, you had Kyrie there, who Kevin Durant, Kyrie obviously have a relationship, played together. You have them there, and then Anthony Davis. I think now that is a kind of a 3-man. Again, I don't think they fit great because who's creating for anyone else, but like you can sell yourself on that. You can sell Mavs fans on that. Like, hey, we got rid of Luka, I know, but look, our window, going back to the thing, 2 to 3 years, our window's 2 to 3 years, and we're going to have Kyrie, Kevin Durant, Anthony Davis, and great role players and a good coach. You could sell them on that. Now I think that's out. With Kyrie out, I think no chance Kevin Durant's going there with who knows what Kyrie's going to look like, and Anthony Davis now 2 years later. So I think there's only 2 teams that make sense. I would say the best team where Kevin Durant could fit in perfectly, and it gives the team what they need as far as going and contending for a championship is the Rockets. So Rockets, you're talking about young team, really, really good defensive culture. Obviously with Ime Udoka there, that's kind of his calling card. Again, great young players who are kind of coming into their own, but still they don't have kind of that guy. I like Jalen. I think he can eventually be that. You got, what's his name? Shingun there. You got Amin. Amin, I think, is the one in Houston. So great young pieces who are probably a couple years away from kind of being in a place where they might be able to be that guy for a championship contending team. But I think Kevin Durant gives them that opportunity the second he steps into that door. And then third is OKC. I think with them, again, great defense. Number 1 defense in the league right now. Obviously, we know what they're doing in the regular season. Basically locking up the 1 seed in the West with like 12 games to go. So we know what they are. Great defense, but kind of missing that. You have Shea, who's like the big time scorer, and then you got some guys who it's like they're kind of coming along as scorers, but they're not really there. Kevin Durant walks in. Between him and Shea, I mean, 1A, 1B options as far as scoring, and you still have a bunch of young guys who can play great defense. You'll still be a great defensive team. So I would say Rockets and OKC in the next year, those would be the teams that I think Kevin Durant and them, it would be mutually good for both of them for those moves to happen. And look, lastly, we're gonna go kind of, now that we're gearing down towards the end of the year, I'm gonna give you guys my top 5 contenders in the NBA, and then I'm gonna give you guys the pretenders. And so these are teams where their records might be great or good, or people might think they're contenders, but I'm going to give you the reasons why they're not and why I can't see them contending for a championship. And so contenders, look, I'm going to rank these 1 to 5 as far as who I think is the most likely to win the championship. So 1 being the most likely, 5 being the least. Like, I really only think there's 5 contenders at this point right now. You have a couple teams on the bubble, I think, but to me right now, there's 5 and probably really only 4 teams that I really think could win the championship. And so, starting at number 1, Celtics said defending champs. Look, they have fully leaned into these analytics, which, as we've seen, can produce some great seasons, but we've also seen can produce some pretty ugly losses when they go cold and they give up 30-point leads. So I still think, look, 1 to 5 for sure. It's the best starting 5 again. 1 to 7, probably the best top 7 in the league. Jason Tatum has been playing incredible, even with the little aura he's got. But no, but Jason Tatum's playing incredible. Jaylen Brown, obviously, always able to get hot. And then they're just a complete team, man. They have defenders at every level, great defenders at every level. They've got guys who you've never heard of who can come in and hit 10 threes in a game. Like, it's crazy. And so Celtics, number 1, most likely to win the championship. Number 2, the Lakers. So with this, it's strictly, I mean, look, you got LeBron and Luka and Austin Reeves. That might be, I'm not even going to say might, that is the best top 3 in the league. 1 to 3, you could say Tatum, Brown, and Porzingis, Drew. The third option to me is where the 1 is where they fall off. Like, it doesn't match up at all. But to me, Lakers have the best top 3 in the league. Now, obviously, their problem is going to be size. The only team they really will probably have to worry about that with would be the Nuggets, maybe the Celtics a little bit. But to me, I just look at it as in any series they're in, they're going to have 2 of the best 3 players. Most series, they're going to have the best player and probably the second best player in the series. And so we've seen what Luka does in the playoffs. We've seen what LeBron does in the playoffs. The improvement they have at coaching now that they've hired LeBron's podcast partner, who also didn't deserve that job. Is JJ still considered LeBron's podcast partner, or is he the Lakers coach now? Anyways, but no, I think the improvement at coach, most series they'll have the best 2 players. All but I would say 1 series they're going to have the best player. And out of everybody in the league, I think there's only 1 team that can match up with them well, and that's the Celtics. I think when you look at any other team that's going to be in contention in the playoffs has 1 great wing defender at most. You got to have 2 to play the Lakers, because if one's got to go on LeBron, one's got to go on Luka. I think the Celtics are the only team that have that. Third, and look, this one was tough. And if you would have asked me up until a week ago, this would have been the Nuggets. But from what I've seen with the Nuggets, it used to be with the Nuggets, it was almost like, you know what? They're going to find a way to win because Jokic is the best player in the world. And these guys hit timely shots. They're always going to have somebody who steps up, whether it's a KCP, a Michael Porter Jr., a Jamal Murray. Somebody's going to step up and have a big game with them. And the guys who don't have big games are still going to hit shots where, we saw it a ton with KCP where, in that some of those Lakers series, the Lakers would kind of start cutting into the lead, get it down to maybe 3 or 2, and then a KCP corner 3, and it's 5, and then it kind of almost just gives them that cushion that the Lakers can never get back into. And so with that, kind of now me questioning that because of who they have in those spots, OKC is now number 3. I think with the defense they have, with Shea, who is an incredible scorer, that defense is going to keep them in games. And I think with the size they have, they can match up somewhat well with the Nuggets. And with that defense, Jokic is obviously going to do what he does. I just don't know who else is really going to do much against that defense. So for that, I have OKC at 3. Nuggets will find their way at 4. Look, you still have Jokic. Anytime it doesn't even go back to anything. Anytime you've got a guy who is considered the best player in the league, you are a contender. Unless they're playing with 4 YMCA pickup guys, like, and even then, some of those LeBron's back in the day when he was peak, probably could have taken 4 YMCA guys. Look, anytime you got the best player in the world, you're a contender. And it's not like the Nuggets team around him is bad. It's just, I think they don't have some of the shot making in key places where they've had it before. And then fifth, this is kind of the one where I'm like, maybe a contender, but I don't really think so. And that's Cleveland. Cleveland, I just think they don't have a guy. Like Donovan Mitchell, for as great as he is, he's not like a guy who can go win you multiple playoff series. Now, they have a great team. Evan Mobley's great. They got a good defense. Evan Mobley's coming to his own. Obviously, Donovan can fill it up. We've seen him fill it up in the playoffs. Darius Garland, I really like. It's just they almost seem to me, almost if I had to kind of equate them to a team. And look, this team did win a championship, which is why I do have them on the contenders, just low. But they almost remind me of the Pistons teams back in the day with like Chauncey and Rashid and Ben and Rip and Torian Prince, where it's like they've got a lot of, like, they've got good players, but they don't have like the guy, but they just played really well and they won it. They won a championship and they gave them all they wanted. And so for that, I give the Cleveland a shot, but I don't see them winning it. And then look, pretenders, man. So again, this isn't necessarily a shot at some of these teams. So like, for instance, the first one, it's not a shot at them. It's just kind of the reality of where they're at. Now, for others, it is a shot. Like, it is definitely a shot. But first one, Rockets. And this is the one where I'm saying it's not a shot. Because look, kind of like I laid down with the KD is, I think they're just too young right now. They kind of remind me of the Memphis teams from back in the day. Just a team that's like a bunch of young guys playing every night, going all out, winning games, got talent, but just too young. We don't see young teams go from missing the playoffs last year to championship contenders. Like the NBA, for whatever it's been over the last however many years, it's one thing as far as it's been consistent in that there's steps teams take. A team doesn't go from being bad to being great without, like, a LeBron James coming onto it, a Kevin Durant going onto it. And even Kevin Durant, not really, but you get what I'm saying. So I think the Rockets, it's just, they're a few steps away. I think if they can get in, maybe win a playoff series, that would be massive for them. But I think this season for them is already a win, especially if they finish at the 2 seed. They've overachieved on their season, and it's a season that they can look back and really build on. Next is Memphis. So Memphis is, I think, kind of like teetering as far as people might think they're contenders, might think they're not. To me, I don't think they're contenders. Obviously, Ja injury issues all year. This is kind of and this is his first year back playing in a full-time role. The defense isn't what it used to be. Triple J, offense has gotten better, defense has gotten worse. I don't see the talent there. Not that they're not talented, but I don't see NBA championship talent. I can't see them winning 3 rounds in the playoffs. And so for that reason, got them on the pretenders. Next one is the Knicks. Look, when the Knicks first got together, the beginning of the year, they made the trade for Cat. I thought this was a team that would seriously contend with Boston if they could figure it out. The problem is they figured it out, but they can't beat good teams. And after the first round, all you're going to face in the NBA playoffs is good teams. So to me, it's as simple as that. Like, if you can't beat good teams, you can't be a contender. I don't care what your record is. I don't care where you're seated. If you can't beat good teams, you can't be a contender. And then lastly, man, the Bucks. And so this one's tough because obviously I think Giannis is a top probably 3 player in the league, but that's also why I have them in the pretender. I just think they are so Giannis dependent. If Giannis doesn't have a great game, they lose. And I think, and even when he does have great games, they lose. So I just think the talent. Now this is a real like. I don't think they have the talent around him to compete. And so, to me, I can't see the Bucks. I could see them getting to the conference finals because of the East. But if they also lost in the second round, it wouldn't surprise me at all. And I definitely could not see them making the finals at all. It would take an app. Let me put it this way: if for them to make the finals, I think Giannis would have to go on a run that people would then say he's the best player in the NBA. And I think Giannis is amazing. I think at one point he was kind of neck and neck with Joker as far as who's the best player in the NBA. But I think with the separation Jokic has now, Giannis would have to close that gap completely with a playoff run. And I just don't think that that's feasible. Look, y'all, I appreciate y'all. That's all we have for y'all today. As always, appreciate you. Tune in again. Look, like, subscribe, click the bell on YouTube, interact with us on social media. And yeah, we'll be back next week. And I'll see y'all then.